Werner, maybe you can share with us how is it to watch your film after a decade or two on the big screen?
Well, I haven't seen it for 40 years or so, but it's still looking back at that time, it still looks like a bold film because nobody made a film like that. And until today, I haven't made a film like that. Again, yeah, it's what I see very clearly. It's very Bavarian, very dark. Something of the Bavarian forest and the waterfalls. And actually, this prophet existed. There was in the 18th century, like a Bavarian Nostradamus, and many of his prophecies are verbatim here. Spoken by here's the prophet. So there's something very strange about it, and even my own country, Bavaria, looks strange and dark and mysterious. And
I'd like to start there because you end with a sentence about maybe it seems like hope. The whole film feels dark and hopeless. So what's your level of, hope or hopelessness today?
Well, I don't really know. Let's not speak about hope or things like that. The prophecies were quite dark. And strange enough, I made the film in the 70s, and nobody really noticed, for example, he says, the climate will change. It was like a very far-fetched, strange thing, like the other prophecies at the time of the clearing of the benches will start. If somebody wants to sit down, and the one who already sits on the bench doesn't want him, then the clearing of the benches begin. And it's very, very strange. So, and at the time when he says certain things, it sounded like a far off prophecy, and it's not really that far off.
Is he mentioning also kind of world war, like big wars he's talking about? The prophet is talking about big wars that seems to be referring to World War I or World War II. Is there any sense of that?
Probably, yes. It has been interpreted, but I'd be careful. It's like when you look at Nostradamus, it's not very coherent and not very articulate about our time. Of course, every single time interprets prophecies for exactly the moment in which we are living now. So I would be careful, but it's okay. That's the nature of such things.
So are you? It's inspired by a book, and you're mentioning the prophets. At what points in the process of writing your film did you think of, let's use hypnosis on the actors? And at which moment did you think about using hypnosis, and why, and how did you do it?
Hypnosis. Actually, the much of the screenplay comes from a Bavarian writer and filmmaker, Herbert Achterbusch, who comes from Lower Bavaria, which is close to the Czech border. I come more from the real Alps, across the Danube River. But he comes from there and made some very strange films as well. And I said, well, I should do a film with his prophecies that he collected and used as part in a film. And then I spoke with him for a while about how do we stylize this very strange looming feeling over everything, over this glass factory, and it's something almost like in trance, like people are like sleepwalkers walking into a foreseen disaster. And then I said to him more, to Achterbusch, more as something aside, I think they should actually act under hypnosis. And he said, why not? And I tried then. So and it was very strange because nobody knew whether people under hypnosis could open their eyes and they wouldn't wake up, and whether they could communicate and have dialogue. By the way, not everyone all the time is under hypnosis. When you see the glass blowers at work, it's because this glass has a temperature of 1,400 degrees Celsius, which is way over 2,500 Fahrenheit or whatever. So it's really, really dangerous. And it was obvious they were not under hypnosis. But otherwise, it was a daily sort of routine, and we made a very careful selection of the cast so that we had people who were stable, who would not have any side effects. It can happen, so you have to do it with a certain amount of caution. And of course there's also a certain talent for hypnosis, for being hypnotized. It's like some people you put on skis and after 5 days they're pretty good already, and some people never learn it. Or riding a bicycle. Kids mount a bicycle and they ride the bicycle, and others can't do it for 5 months and they're still struggling, still toppling over. So yes, we developed a simple methodology to find out people of certain stability, people who had a talent for hypnosis, and then when it's a daily routine, it goes very fast.
Fascinating. Did you kind of separate the shoot where the one that were under hypnosis versus the one that were not? Did you create kind of your day of shoot dividing who will be?
No, when you see, for example, people in the country, they are basically all under hypnosis, and it's almost all the time. But sure, there were some moments, or for example, when Hears at the end fights with an imaginary bear. That's something where, of course, you don't put him under hypnosis. But it's maybe 5% or 10% of the film there's no hypnosis.
Can you talk about working with your cinematographer? The landscape are beautiful, the scene in the tavern or the light is really beautiful.
Yeah, it's my country, in particular at the beginning.
Yeah.
When you see over the landscape, that's my country, that's where I come from. But later, when he speaks about the world and he speaks about a waterfall and cascading water, that was Niagara Falls. In some country like Atlantis, coming out of the waters, it was shot partially in Alaska, partially in Ireland. And what we did was we would film it, and sometimes it's material that I filmed on Super 8mm celluloid. And then what we would do is we would select a very specific type of screen, which was some fabric, like Japanese paper or some other types of fabric, and project the image from behind onto the screen from a very short distance. So you would have an image a little bit larger than my hand. And from our side here, we would film it with 35mm celluloid then again. So it creates a very, very strange effect. The structure of the images and the look of the images is very, very unusual.
Were you thinking about paintings when you were, creating that film?
No, I never had any paintings in mind, and nothing really reminds me of paintings. I haven't seen paintings like that.
the romantic, the German romantics?
No,
Are
they
not
painted
as
different.
far-
No, different. That's always a dangerous thing to speak about romanticism, because there's a very insipid school of thought that tries to desperately connect me with German romanticism. Wrong. Not to get any more stupid. Just look at, when you look, for example, at Burden of Dreams,
Yeah.
a wonderful film that Les Blanc made, In the Jungle. I'm ranting against the jungle, and I speak about the obscenity of the jungle, and how debased and vile and chaotic this nature here is, and it's a perfect the perfect rant against any notion of romanticism. You see it everywhere throughout my films, but it's you see there's a disease now coming at us, and the disease is film studies, film theory. And it has come decades before in poetry, with a literary sort of theory trying to analyze and x-ray poetry, and they almost destroyed poetry, but thanks God poetry was strong enough to outlive these vile attempts, and I will outlive these attempts to declare myself a romantic. And I will outlive.
Should we go to the audience?
Yes, sure, yes.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
And I
Can you speak up, please?
Yes, I read the book every night. The trees disappear, and for years I've wanted to see the film that the book chronicles. I'm curious now, looking back on your own film 40 years ago, if you remember the actual making of the film, the journey through the mountain.
Well, it's a book that was written by Alan Greenberg, who was in Munich at that time, and he joined me on some films, and he kept some sort of a chronicle for himself. And there was a first version of the book which was very embarrassing. It was so much adulation for me. And I said, Alan, I hope this book will somehow be forgotten quickly. But he said, he promised to me, yes, I see 20 years ago I really was not in the right mindset up, and I tried to write the book again now. What is the title? Every Night the Trees Disappear. And he describes, for example, how I hypnotized the actors. Alan Greenberg passed away 2 or 3 years ago, and he was an American from Miami, a wild sort of wild character, has desperately tried over a long time to do a film on Robert Johnson, yes, tried to do it with the Rolling Stones, which was a mistake. I kept hammering into Alan, this is all blues music. This is all music in the deep south, in Mississippi. There's not a single white singer there. Why do you speak about Mick Jagger should be in it? No, he shouldn't be in it. But it somehow had taken hold of his fantasies. And the film was never made. And there's a screenplay, and it was a long, famous cause of a film that was not made. Maybe, if we look back in long time in the future now, maybe it was good that the film wasn't made, or at least not the way Alan Greenberg tried to do it.
Any question? Yes, go ahead.
One of the most
Can you speak loud?
one of the most striking parts of Heart of Glass was when that painting fell off the wall. And I was wondering if that was planned or an accident, or if he had any other happy accidents like that.
When the painting in the film, when the painting fall down, is it an accident or is it planned?
No, the painting fell. And Herr Scheitz, who is in different other films with me, he was really, and somehow for a moment I had the feeling he was taken out of his state to some degree, and then he lapses back. And it's a very strange moment. And it reminds me of a moment that Errol Morris had in his first film, Gates of Heaven. There's a young man, it's all about Pet Cemetery and the dynasty of people who run Pet Cemetery. And behind one of them, an image falls. And it's very strange, and I think it falls at a very significant moment. The young man says something so deep and so strange. I mean, Roger Ebert kept raving and ranting about this. This was one of his most favorite lines ever in movies. The young man looks straight into the camera and he says, and he muses about life and death. And then finally he gathers all his brain power and his thoughts together, and he says straight into the camera, death is for the living and not for the dead so much. And not for the dead, comma, so much. You just can die for a line like this. Yeah, it's one of those moments where things happen.
Question? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of mystery to this movie, and you brought up the hypnotizing of the actors, and that explains a lot. But I've never heard of anything like this. Can you explain more what this process of hypnotizing the actors is? If there's side effects, like what's the day-to-day of that?
You mean side effects of hypnosis?
I'm curious about it all.
Or you mean, well, in a way, the book, Every Night the Trees Disappear, gives a little bit of the background and of the day-to-day. So we would need a long time to explain it. But how shall I say it? It was a lot of pre-production time, selection of a cast. Every weekend we would invite about 20-25 candidates. We published advertisements in a local paper and asked people willing to take part in a movie experiment, and it would be had to do with hypnosis as well. So whoever felt like participating, please sign up, come, and we'll test it and we'll find out. And normally, out of 25 each weekend, I would have 2 or 3 of those who were not candidates anymore, who would be then incorporated into the cast. And then on the set, it takes always a little bit longer if you have one individual. When you have 3, 4, 5 all at the same time for hypnotizing, it is more effective because there's some sort of a collective suggestion then. And it's like I keep saying, when you are traveling in a car and you have 4 guys with you in the car, and somewhere all of a sudden one of them says, "Oh, can you stop? I have to take a leak." And he steps out. All of a sudden, all the others need to take it. They hadn't thought about it before, but it's like a collective suggestion then. And so hypnotizing more people is easier. And I have shown films to audiences about the size of this audience, where I would hypnotize the audience and then show films to them under hypnosis. And very strange, some of them would have experiences like in virtual reality. Some of them saw, for example, Agere but they were able to fly around behind Aguirre and then see the people in the theater from Aguirre's point of view, some very, very strange layers of consciousness and perceptions. And people under hypnosis are quite good with memories, so sometimes evoking hidden or lost memories sometimes is good. Sometimes people are very can be induced into the poetry of language. If I put you under hypnosis and I tell you you're now Kafka or you are Shakespeare, write me a sonnet, you probably wouldn't be able to do it, but you have to. It has to do with the quality of the suggestion. I would tell people about a wonderful island in the jungle, deserted. Nobody has been there for half a millennium. And you would land in a boat and walking through the jungle, and all of a sudden you would come and face a cliff, and you take a good look, and the cliff is all one gigantic piece of emerald. And a holy monk lived there and spent all his life to chisel one line or two lines of poem into it, because this emerald is so hard like diamond. It took him his whole lifetime to chisel the poem into this gigantic cliff of emerald. And I would say, can you open your eyes now and take a look, and you can see the inscription. What did the monk write? And then all of a sudden some very, very beautiful things came. It's very, very odd, and I was intrigued, but I gave it up fairly quickly because it has been used in circus as circus gimmicks, and it's not good. You should have it done under supervision. You should know what you are doing. In particular, you should be careful about slowly, and without fear, and without panic, and without anxiety, to bring somebody back from the state of hypnosis into the reality of where we are now. So, and I gave it up completely. But in some later films, you will see, for example, that I hypnotized, or I had actors hypnotize a chicken. You can hypnotize a chicken by grabbing its neck and putting the beak down to the ground, and then you have a piece of chalk, and from the beak you draw a straight line very rapidly, and the chicken stays completely mesmerized and doesn't move. You can even turn the chicken on its back with the legs sticking up in the air, and then it would look to the ground because you have a piece of chalk and you draw the line quickly, and the chicken will stay hypnotized very long time on its back. I've also seen hypnotized crocodiles in a circus. How that was made, I don't know, but apparently we can hypnotize crocodiles as well. But chicken, everyone can do. Try it out at your homestead.
Do you have one more last question before the book signing? Yes, go ahead.
So how does directing hypnotized actors differ, and does that inspire you later for like not hypnotized?
How to direct them? Well, there's a misconception that people believe that you have power over those who are hypnotized. No, you do not. It's very, very limited. Memory is better sometimes, but if I hypnotize you and I give you a knife in your hand and I tell you, stab your wife right now, you would say no. You would refuse because it would be against the hardcore of your character. You're not a murderer. But you would lie under hypnosis. That's why, for example, hypnosis is not used for witnesses during a criminal investigation. So it's not, and normally it was fairly static. You cannot have them move around too much because they get disoriented. And for example, when Woody and Usher, when he dances with a dead man, when he spins around, he would be under hypnosis immediately disoriented. I said, no, let's not do it. And of course, the dead man is not dead. He plays dead and he's not hypnotized. So, but otherwise, it's not for having more power or so of director over it. That would be complete nonsense. It's not, certainly not like that. It's a stylization. It's a trance-like ambience that somehow belongs to this entire village community.
We're about to go into the book signing for your novel, The Twilight Worlds. Do you want to say a few things about your novel before we go and walk to the book signing?
Well, the problem is it's not just this novel. I don't even know whether it's a novel, but it has been labeled. It's hard for me to categorize it. It's called The Twilight World, and I've met the last Japanese soldier who surrendered 29 years after the end of the Second World War, still believing that the war was on. And he had interpreted every single sign that he found. For example, leaflets were thrown down at him, and he found in the leaflets, please surrender, the war is over, and you can go to this or that meeting point and you will not be killed. But he has been under persecution, and he survived 111 ambushes and skirmishes. And in the leaflets there were some misspellings of Japanese characters, which was proof for him. All of a sudden it was clear to him, proof to him, this was the enemy. This was the CIA that tried to lure him out of the jungle. And he rejected whatever was the content of the leaflet, or he would see planes flying overhead. But that was the Korean War. Then years later, 8 years, 9 years, Vietnam War, battleships passing by his island, all for him proof that the war hadn't ended. It actually hadn't ended. For America's war had not ended. It hadn't ended with Korea, with the Second World War. It hadn't ended with Korea. It hadn't ended with the Vietnam War, and it hadn't ended with Iraq. So it's strangely enough, he interpreted something which was had a strange layer of truth in it. And problem is, I have written yet another book right after that, some sort of memoirs, and the title of it is Every Man by Himself and God Against All.
And did it come out or is it coming out?
Pardon? It will also be released in Germany in a few weeks,
Right.
in its original German, but the English translation is still being done, and it probably will be released next year by also the Penguin Random House. And I'm glad that all of a sudden people see that I'm really a writer, and keep saying sometimes, like films are my voyage, and writing is home. That describes it fairly clearly. And the problem is that I've also made 2 films. I have 2 finished films that have to be released. And on Sunday in Sheffield at the festival, a new film is being released and I can't even be there. And probably Toronto, Venice or Telluride, yet another film will be released. So it's a backlog of things.
and we'll have a lot of time this weekend to talk about it with all of the audience as well. We're going to be walking to the book signing to, be able to get your book and get it signed. For everyone, if you have tickets for the 10 p.m. Screening, Werner will be introducing Nosferatu the Vampire. So I'll be back here a little before 10. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.